It's time to be woke, take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke, cause the wicked hide behind the cloak, and if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked, so listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog, cause there's a difference when you breathe it in, so don't let the corporate media take you for a spin, this that morning show, they put you in the know, so I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, 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 yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. The dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the song, we out here, yeah. Speeding.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is Wednesday, I think. Yes, it is Wednesday today. Congratulations, you made it halfway. Welcome. We're glad you decided to join us this morning. We have a really big show for you today. We have a returning guest coming on to talk to us and critique us and tell us why we're mean and nasty and other things. And that starts with the introduction of my lovely and talented co-host, Miss Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Hey, good morning, Andy. Good morning, everybody who's joining us. We'll let you get settled here before we get started. But thank you so much for joining us on your Wednesday. And welcome to everybody who's listening in on iTunes, Spotify, and other wonderful podcast stations via House of Public Discourse. Welcome to the Fred Hampton Leftist Network. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And if this is your first time tuning in, we want you to know that this is completely interactive and we want you to participate in this conversation, particularly today with our guests that we have coming on in just a little bit. So if you type something in the chat, regardless of where you're watching us on your social media networks, particularly Fred Hampton Leftist YouTube, you will see those comments and we will read them to our guests. We will participate and interact with you. Keep it civil, and we deal in facts here, not alternative facts, not opinions that you just made up and called facts, just facts. So just to let you know, those are our ground rules, but we definitely invite everyone to participate. So the first thing that I have this morning, and we're going to talk about this with our guests, is Food and Water Watch. Are you following Food and Water Watch? It's a nonprofit organization, and this is my opinion, but every time that I have booked them or tried to get them on as a guest or representative from their organization, they have to cancel because they get called into court or they get called to testify before a state or congressional hearing. So if you're at all worried about an organization that is performative only, this is not them. And in fact, they had a landmark case that was just decided on appeal. They have now won their argument against the EPA in Iowa on behalf of family farmers in Iowa. So what this case was about, this is amazing. The EPA, if you don't know, the EPA is a federal organization, but each state and district is sort of autonomous. Like they figure, well, whoever's watching it in Iowa will do a good job on behalf of the people of Iowa. Well, in this case, Food and Water Watch said they were not. In fact, they argued that the water that was being monitored was not fairly applied to corporate farms. So if you're a family farm or even a homeowner, you are subject to all sorts of rules and regulations about water runoff and reclamation and all of these sorts of things. But those rules were not being applied to factory farms. So Food and Water Watch helped lead a legal case, and they've been fighting this for over a year and a half. And if you go on their website, you can see bit by bit how they were challenging this in court. And what was amazing to me is if you have any doubt about where the conservative corporate mindset is, all you have to look at is the Iowa State House and their committees. They were siding with the factory farms to actively pollute the waterways in Iowa. And if you're anywhere near Iowa in a neighboring state, you were getting that runoff too. So their appeal was just upheld, and they announced it yesterday. Fantastic decision. Now the EPA in Iowa is going to be held accountable to making sure that they get the right kind of data and the right kind of reporting from these factory farms. So this is a big deal, everybody. And I just want to mention that today is the first day, the first ever symposium that Food and Water Watch is hosting, and it's a virtual conference. Amy Goodman is the keynote speaker. You can sign on to join this virtual conference, and they have two tracks. One is informational, administrative, and the other is to train activists in how to effectively challenge all of these water and food issues that we have right now. So their ticketing starts at $25 and it goes up. But what's nice about the way that they're handling this is if you can't join today, because most of us are working, you have 30-day access to on-demand training. So I just want to put that out there, and I did put a link in the chat. If you're not following them, you should be. Call your mom, brush your teeth, follow Food and Water Watch. Got it?
Don't sit too close to the television.
You don't sit too close to the television. You ruin your eyes.
For God's sakes, don't run with scissors.
I do it all the time.
I knew it.
So before we welcome our lovely guest, I just want to say good morning to people who are already popping off in the chat. So Malik, good morning. Kevin Toohey, hi comrades. Phenomenal mysticism. Okay, phenomenal. Good morning. Phenomenal says, I'm usually asleep when the show airs. The truth is I'm still half asleep, but I'm listening. Thank you. Good morning. And we hope you have a wonderful day. Troy C. and everyone else who's joining. So let's go ahead and get started. And we are going to grill our next guest politely, but it has to be done. So this is Gregory Karr. And I keep trying to get him to run for Senate. So in my head, he's running for Senate, but he's not. He's running for the House of Representatives in South Carolina's 2nd District. So welcome, Gregory. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Caffeinated. I am totally caffeinated. I'm ready to go. So
it's a good way to be.
So if you missed our prior interview with Gregory, we talked about why he was running, and we'll get into some of that. But the purpose of this show is to have Gregory back on because as a progressive, and you could be anywhere in the political spectrum but follow progressive policy. As a progressive, I am continually dismayed by the Progressive Caucus in Congress right now. So the question always comes up when you have a true progressive running for Congress, what makes you different? And I thought rather than asking that question directly, which we've already done with Gregory, I was like, okay, let's challenge him with some really key issues, some things that have happened in the headlines, but let's see how a true progressive would respond to these particular issues, and as well as your questions, right? So that is what we're doing this morning. So Gregory, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
You might
Andy,
think you're ready.
I'm gonna let you go first.
Oh no, you fire it up. Fire it up, Gary. Go ahead. I know you're just waiting.
All right.
I know you're waiting.
I am because look, if any one of us could sit down with the squad or any member of the Progressive Caucus, we'd be like, dude, what are we doing? So here we get the opportunity with somebody who's running to join this team. Right. So here are the issues that I want to talk about. I opened up this morning with Food and Water Watch, and Gregory, you're running in South Carolina. This is an area that has been particularly hard hit with factory farms and the factory corporate food producers. I think we've done 4 or 5 nationwide. And during this pandemic, we saw like Tyson in their corporate offices were talking about, oh, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to break our food supply. But yet in these factory farms, they were taking bets over who was going to die. in their workforce, right? So it was this horrific scenario of how far we've gone into its fascism. It's truly. So with Food and Water Watch now, this case that came out of Iowa, how do you feel about this? That our own environmental protection agency had to be drugged into court several times to do their own damn job, right? So now let's imagine, Gregory, you're sitting in Congress, you've got all of these family farmers in South Carolina. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that the EPA had to be dragged into court numerous times in order, as you say, to do their job, this is nothing new. They have any number of standards of adequacy that are far from adequate as far as protecting the food and water supply of this country. And so, you know, they have always been reluctant to do any more than they absolutely have to, or than the courts force them to do. So this is definitely a landmark case. I'm glad that the court reversed its original opinion as far as that particular case. But when it comes to water cleanliness, water safety, this is a human right, and so we cannot treat it as some sort of a, you know, normal political divide, friendly debate. You know, it's not a matter of friendly debate. It's a matter of basic human health and safety and rights. And so, whether it's the Raccoon River in Iowa, whether it's the Flint River in Michigan, whether it's Denmark, South Carolina, where the water has been badly polluted for over a decade, clean water is a human right. And so anything that that members of Congress can possibly do to hold the factory farms to account, up to and including what has been proposed in Iowa, which is establishing a moratorium on factory farm development. We have to recognize that certain industries are not designed to take into account the public interest in how they operate their business. And so, that being the case, at some point, we do have to say, well, look, we cannot further proliferate this form of industry. And what already exists within that industry has to be rigorously held to account and rigorously regulated. You said in your introduction, the small family farms, they're held to rigorous account. Any slight slip up, you know, they'll have the full weight and power of the FDA and the EPA coming down on their heads. But when it comes to these multi-billion-dollar factory farm corporations, they can just, you know, run free and do whatever they want and pollute, you know, whatever water supply with abandon, and not have to worry about much accountability until, you know, every now and then they get sued and they have to pay a few $1 million in recompense. But, you know, it's like pennies out of our pockets for them to pay those fines. So there really has to be an institutional approach to scaling down and holding to deep account these factory farm corporations that, as I say, have no inherent interest in the public health.
I wanted to also talk about, sorry, Carrie, for interrupting. I wanted to also talk about these huge industrial factory farms, that the whole concept of these humongous farms is that, you know, they're large corporations, just you know, that monopolize an industry in an area where they're putting smaller farmers, mom and pop farms, out of business. They're one of the largest polluters in terms of greenhouse gases that go into the atmosphere. That's you know, for climate change and all of these problems. And they're also you know, just like the too big to fail banks get too large, and the people that own those companies you know, become multi-billionaires. what is your position on these factory farms just in general?
Well, as I said, I think that they don't really have any place expanding within the farming industry. As they exist right now, as you say, they exist to push out whatever competition there might be, and so honestly, I would personally support, as I said, scaling down the existing factory farm industry, but that begins with preventing its further spread. So that's why I support what's been proposed in Iowa, which is the moratorium on further factory farms. But at a certain point, we are going to have to move away from the corporate run farming industry that cannot and will not sustain healthy farming practices.
Okay, so there are a number of questions coming in, so thank you, everybody. But real quick, my first question is, when we're talking about accountability, we know for decades, Gregory, you know this, that all of these watchdog organizations, from the IRS, the EPA, all of these groups, FEC, have been defanged. Their money and ability to effectively investigate some of these things has all been done away with, right? And this push for smaller government, what they actually did was defund these oversight organizations. So I have a two-part question for you. Would you be in favor of adding funding for the purposes of better oversight for these organizations? And two, this is a question that came in about, Mike Patino asked this, state representatives, state senators, in addition to their local congressperson, must be held accountable. So when we have the House Ethical Oversight Committee, this is the foxes watching the hen house. So this question is all about accountability, not just for corporate farms, but for everybody, right? So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, of course we should have adequate funding in the enforcement and oversight agencies, and the fact that that they're continually defunded is a matter of design to make them as ineffective as ineffectual as possible. But what you hinted at as far as conflicts of interest within members of Congress and their own investments in the industries that they're tasked with holding to account. Yes, there have to be ethics standards put into place and enforced that prohibit members of Congress from carrying those conflicts of interest. If you have personal ties to the factory farm industry, you cannot serve on a committee that is tasked with holding those very industries and those very corporations to account. That should be pretty simple for anybody to get their heads around if they're dealing in good faith on these issues.
I think fair enough. And then following on that, YupX asked this question, I think, that is near and dear to my heart and most everybody who's watching. They ask, how about municipal broadband internet and passing the Internet Bill of Rights, abolishing HR 1 and enacting antitrust laws to break up big monopolies? Okay, this is a big deal, right? Because you're going up against some of the billionaire class and big tech. Kind of an incendiary topic, but how would you handle it?
Yeah, well, and it is in my proposed Workers' Bill of Rights, which people can find on my website, the right to broadband internet, the right to all communications, because we live in a communicative society, and we cannot exclude those who live. You experience this issue where you're living, Carrie, and millions of people throughout South Carolina experience this issue where not only do they live in areas where they don't have broadband, so they don't have reliable internet access, so they're never going to see these shows. They also don't have access to cell service. In many cases, they don't even have access to landline service, as exorbitant as those costs have become to have landline service. Even if they wanted and were willing to pay for landline service, they couldn't get it in many parts of the state. And so we have to recognize communication as a basic human right, because we cannot function in this communicative society if we cannot access the internet, if we cannot have phone service. Again, we have to ensure that every region in our country is tied in to the communication networks so that they can fully participate in society.
Yeah, and there's also a point, and it's specific to Carrie's situation. Everybody that's watched our show knows that she's constantly fighting with bandwidth to try to get on and do our show, and it's a testament to her ability, considering where she lives in New Mexico in the high desert. But we hear that the solution to this should be a quote unquote socialized, paid for by the government internet as a right. But instead what we're seeing is Elon Musk's companies throwing satellites up in the atmosphere and covering the whole planet in broadband. But now we're talking about a huge, large multinational corporation that's now going to get a monopoly of good broadband for everyone, and that just increases the wealth inequality in this country because they can still charge whatever they want for it, right? How do you feel about the internet as a right to people that should be either very low charge or free of no cost?
All communication is a right, and that includes internet. And as far as the privatization of communication and the Elon Musks of the world shooting up satellites to cover the world in broadband, frankly, there's nothing that Tesla or any other corporation can accomplish that can't be accomplished under the public ownership. Because at the end of the day, the people who are designing and build and constructing and launching and maintaining those satellites, in the case of Elon Musk, those are the workers. It's not Elon Musk himself. He's just the one who owns and profits. So the work can be done with the workers, by the workers, and for the workers under public ownership. There just has to be the political will to say that certain things are human rights, certain things are basic necessities, and if that is recognized to be the case, then it cannot be under private ownership for profit, because that will always stand in the way of certain members of society participating in those resources, like benefiting from those resources.
Right.
And that includes energy infrastructure, which is also in my platform.
And healthcare.
Yep. The list goes on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So along these lines of your platform, if we get to the root of your platform, when you're talking about basically the Green New Deal for jobs guarantee, all of these things, these are all solidly progressive. But then, and this ties into a question that came in from a couple of our viewers, you are fighting against corporate subsidies that are already in place, part of the pork barrel spending that's happening, as well as members of Congress with this revolving door, right? So we see this time and time again, where members of Congress, their staff, leave, go to one of these corporations, start to lobby for these rules and regulations to be relaxed, and oh, by the way, on the public dime, we're gonna make some extra profits. So what do you do about this as a member of Congress? What are you proposing for this? And what exactly would you fight for? Now, mind you, you've only got a short amount of time. So what is your first action in that regard?
Yeah, there has to be a wall constructed between Congress and K Street, where you can't just have that revolving door, where as soon look at John Boehner when he retired from Congress. Where did he immediately land in the cannabis industry? He spent decades supporting the war on drugs and locking up and destroying the lives of people who sold and consumed marijuana. And then his first windfall after leaving Congress was to join the newly legalized cannabis industry in certain states. So these are very craven individuals who, wherever they can find money to be had, they will go. They have no ethical standards, and so that's why we have to have standards of ethics that are put into place and enforced, so that people are not left to their own devices. Members of Congress are not left to their own devices to make a profit wherever they can. There have to be standards, and where we do have those standards, they're woefully under-enforced. So there has to be a solid wall, however that's accomplished, however the legislation is worded. That's not something that I can speak to in detail today, or any of us can, but the principle is that there has to be a solid wall constructed between Congress and private investment once they've left. They receive pensions from their time in Congress. They should not be allowed to enrich themselves on the suffering and neglect of those that they currently or once were tasked with representing.
I think that's fair enough. And for those who are just tuning in, I saw a couple questions from our late joiners this morning. Good morning. We are talking to candidates for Congress in the South Carolina District 2 race. This is Gregory Karr. He is running for Congress. So rather than just asking him about his platform and doing a rehash of a show that we've done earlier, we're challenging him on specific timely issues that are happening right now. So with that, the big headline, Gregory, right now is the debt ceiling. And this is a subject that is near and dear to Andy's heart. And in fact, Andy, for those of you who haven't seen it, Macro and Cheese, Andy is the executive producer and puts all of that great audio together. He had John Yarmouth and his son on this past Saturday. Macro and Cheese, seriously check that out, because this, for those of you who are in the MMT community, we had a watershed moment, and this particular podcast, it's very short. Really, you need to check it out because it is mind-blowing the way that this happens. So the debt ceiling, and I'm going to let you and Andy talk about this one, but what's going on with the debt ceiling, and are you in favor of raising it, abolishing it, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the debt ceiling has to be abolished. It's a farce. We see this every year or so. This doom and gloom debate over, oh my God, the fiscal cliff is approaching. The debt ceiling is nearly reached, and we're going to have to shut down the government if we can't come to some agreement, some bipartisan compromise. Doom and gloom scenario. But when you ask everyday working people, what does the debt ceiling? How does the debt ceiling impact your life? One way or another, unless you're working directly for the federal government, these government shutdowns do not really improve or degrade the basic livelihood of working people. And so it's just this nebulous thing that we hear and tune out every year. But it is truly insidious because it's designed to create this conflict every year or so that forces discussions of austerity when it comes to programs that benefit working people in this country. We're always the first ones on the chopping block when we have to decide, oh well, where do we have to cut so that we can come to an agreement with the conservatives in Congress and in the House and in the Senate, so that we can get anything passed to keep the government running, or to reopen the government if it's already been shut down. But it's all a farce, because as you know, Andy, as you know, Carrie, as many of your viewers and listeners know, there is nothing spending-wise that cannot be approved if there's the political will at the federal level to approve it. So that this is what was discussed briefly, or what was raised briefly when I last came on with Modern Monetary Theory. And I have been slowly making my way through Stephanie Kelton's book. I haven't finished yet, but the federal government, Congress, can approve the spending that there is the political will to approve for spending, and so they do not need this debt ceiling, which is basically tied to the pay-go myth, that what the federal government spends has to be accounted for in revenue first. And of course, that's a lie, because they issue the currency, they don't use the currency. So, not to say that there aren't members of Congress who are fooled by this farce. I'm sure many do sincerely believe that that the debt ceiling is a real and necessary restriction on federal action. But there is no benefit or need for having the debt ceiling, because we see it time and time again. Every time it gets raised, but only after they've taken something away from working people. And so we have to stop. We have to stop that farce that's only serving to hurt those in greatest need.
That's absolutely right. And I would contend that if anybody can prove to me that there is an actual debt ceiling, I will paint it. So
okay, I have myself muted, but okay, that was good, Andy.
But no, it's absolutely a farce, and you hit it spot on, Gregory. It is basically political theater, as James Brutus said in our chat. It's one way for a certain party to completely politically weaponize it against the other party, to vilify that party or get something that they want, or to maintain an austerity narrative or what have you. And the only people that suffer from that are the people that rely on checks or from a paycheck from the government, right? And that ends up just affecting poor people for the most part, right? So this whole thing is insane. And one thing that John did let us know on the podcast last Saturday was that there is a group of 46 Republican senators that have signed a agreement that they will have completely refused to raise the debt ceiling. Right. So unless the remaining people, the remaining Republicans and the Joe Manchins and the Kristen Sinemas can all agree, because they need 60 votes, right? Then we potentially are going to see another shutdown. And who does that affect? Right.
Yeah. And I mean, there are enough there are enough people in power who know exactly what they're doing, and it really is criminal.
Absolutely.
Okay, speaking of criminality, we have two questions that came in that I really want to get to. So the first one is PAYGO. We've done several different shows on PAYGO explaining why it is and what it is and all of that. So Phenomenal Mysticism, who is now wide awake, is asking, are you for exemption or elimination of the PAYGO rule? And Phenomenal Mysticism says there's a difference between exemption and elimination. Which one are you for?
Elimination, because they exempt it. They exempt themselves from it all the time when there's immediate political will on a specific issue that benefits them in some way. So again, it's political theater, as one of your commenters said. So they have and exercise the power to suspend PAYGO when they want to, and enforce it when they want to do that. And so I absolutely support the elimination of the PAYGO rule. It serves no good purpose for us.
How many years in a row has it been that the federal government has increased the budget to the military? They never talk about PAYGO when they do that.
Right. But when it comes to things like Medicare for all and forgiving student loan debt, forgiving medical debt, things that will actually tangibly improve the basic standards of living of the majority of this country, they look through doe eyes and talk about, oh well, we would if we could, if only we had the money. It's absurd.
But the parliamentarian is so mean.
Oh yeah, well.
Yeah, James just brought that up. The same excuse for the parliamentarian. So thank you on that one. Eric Gray, while you have a valid question, it says explain in full detail how your policies will help marginalized communities. We will get to that at the very end. Our first entire segment with Gregory did cover all of that. I did put the link to his website, so that's going to be a lot more than what we may have time for. But I really want to get to this question because we've already talked about oversight, accountability, the revolving door, political theater, and this is the big one that I think goes under the radar for me. And let me set this up in context. I grew up overseas, and I have personally lived through 3 different coups, an actual coup, either by the military or a minority government faction, all of these sort of things. So when the January 6th events happened, I was watching with most other people, watching things come down, and I know some of the background of what was going on between security forces and all of the players in action. So what I was actually waiting for were elements of a legal. These are the legal requirements for a coup, and those came down. What we saw was members of the administration had taken steps and given orders to stand down for the National Guard. They were doing things from a legal framework that crossed the line of a coup. And so when I saw those things and I saw them play out in real time, I was like, yeah, this is actually a coup. This is no longer a protest. This is no longer free speech. This is no longer people getting out of hand and doing all of these things. This is the framework of government officials charged with protection standing down in a coordinated effort. So that is not just my opinion. These are things that just actually happen. So Gregory, as I'm watching all of this now after the events, and I see members of Congress who cannot even hold their colleagues accountable for everything that transpired, I am dismayed, right? They're sitting next to people who literally tried to have them killed, and they can do nothing. So what do you do coming in as a member of Congress? You're just one guy, but what do you do, and would you hold anybody accountable? We've already talked about insider trading and all of these things. This is serious. People died, people were injured, people were maimed, and legally, this was a coup attempt, a failed coup attempt, but nonetheless. So what do you do, Gregory? You're just some guy from South Carolina. How do you approach this?
Yeah, and there really is very little that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 members of Congress can do to expel from their bodies the insurrectionist members of Congress, Andy Biggs, Mo Brooks, Paul Gosar, to name a few, who the supposed leader of the lead organizer of the Capitol riot said himself that those 3 members of Congress, Andy Biggs, Mo Brooks, and Paul Gosar, were directly involved in the planning phase of the rally, the Trump rally, and the subsequent demonstration and invasion of the Capitol building. Lauren Boebert, who throughout the day was tweeting about the location of Nancy Pelosi and other political opponents. There is clear evidence that came out through the investigations conducted by the January 6th Commission that demonstrate that the tours were conducted on January 5th were reconnaissance missions They were scoping and they were casing the Capitol building. Those who invaded the Capitol had very highly unusual knowledge of the layout of the Capitol complex and knew exactly where to go. And so they cannot have known certain things without the cooperation of sitting members of Congress. And we've seen through the evidence collected by the January 6th Commission that there are members of Congress, including those whom I've named, who are directly responsible for planning with and aiding on the day those fascists who stormed the Capitol. So exactly how we hold them to legal account, including expelling them from their seats in Congress and legally prosecuting them. I don't know exactly how we do that without the broader political will to do so within Congress. It seems to me that much like Gerald Ford when he pardoned Nixon, there's just this respectability narrative of, well, we just have to heal. The long national nightmare has to be over. And if we were to, same thing with Obama and the Bush administration, if we launch these prosecutorial efforts, then it's only going to further divide the American people, and let's just get over it. And that seems to be the prevailing narrative around January 6th, is let's just get over it. But the fact of the matter is we cannot get over it because we have these sitting members of Congress who, as you said, Carrie, were directly involved in attempts to attack, detain, and in certain cases, murder other members of Congress. So I don't know how some of these members of Congress go to work every day and sit next to these people and coordinate with them every day. It would and will make me sick to work with them, and anything that I can do to organize those with a political will among my colleagues to first expel these members and then hold them to legal account, I will do. Exactly what that looks like, I'm probably at as much of a loss as many. If that will isn't there right now, it's hard to imagine what would make somebody care. But once I'm in that position, it will be a priority of mine to make sure that my colleagues and I are not forced to work with people who would have us killed.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I'm with Aspen following on this one. There can be no healing without justice. And I'm coming from the framework where the average citizen who participated in it, we saw that the FBI was investigating, some have been charged. We get the dual justice system at work yet again. And so from my mind, we are inviting this type of behavior again if we're not willing to prosecute our betters, the elite sitting in Congress, but we are with the average citizen who had breaking and entering and all the other various charges that are coming down with them. So I'm not expecting you to address my frustration, but literally understand it, because regular folks are being held accountable, but not, like you said, Boebert and all of these other people who we know have admitted to participating in this. So
and I think what you're saying is in full agreement with what I was saying, which is that to speak about the need to hold members of Congress to proper legal account for what they did is not an exoneration of the members of the general public who participated in that riot. It is absurd that there is the dual standard of justice, and that has to be corrected. But we have to be cautious in having that conversation, that we don't suggest that there's some way somehow some inherent exoneration of members of the public who are being held to account simply because their betters, as you phrase it, are not. We have to correct the one side without sacrificing the other.
Agreed. Okay, I want to ask this question from James Root because this is something that comes up quite often. Reparations, are you for or against?
Yes, for.
For. Okay.
Yeah,
then,
I mean, I can continue if you want.
There is nothing else. Well, if you want to, but to me, it's a yes or no. Reparations, yeah, let's get it done. Put it out there. So clarify it. Clarify it for me.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's a simple yes or no. But I think anybody who understands why it's a simple yes or no understands that we're talking about a deep debt that this country owes to Black members of our society, and not just Black Americans, but also Native Americans, Hispanic Americans. We owe a deep debt to a very large segment of our population who have been subjected to generational terror, generational poverty, generational abuse, generational neglect. We have a history of creating second and third tier citizenship for many members of our society, and the methods and the impacts are further reaching than we could ever discuss in the time that we have today. But the simple fact of the matter is a debt is owed. That debt has to be calculated, and frankly, whatever we calculate will probably not be enough. But the debt has to be calculated and it has to be paid because, as you said before, Carrie, there can be no healing without justice, and until we settle that economic debt that this nation owes to a very large portion of our society, we can never heal.
That's a very good point. The one point I just follow up on that just quickly, that we have to also understand that reparations doesn't just mean cutting a check to people, right? It's having the progressive or the leftist style policies in place that will do a lot to give us a more just society that we live in, right? So if you're going to give a certain amount of money to the to people in your society without actually addressing the root problems and why that occurred, and the the intolerant stuff that we see, like the fact that Black and brown people lost between 70 and 80% of their complete wealth of in the 2008-2009 financial crisis, right? That the means of production is completely in the hands of white people, that you have, if you put in place certain policies like a federal job guarantee and have Medicare for all, and you deal with the injustices in society, then that's the complete reparations package that we need. It's not just giving Black and brown people cutting them a check so that they can give it back to the capitalists again, right?
Yeah, no, this is not a matter of buying our absolution as a white society. Obviously, we have to reorganize our society as you've described, so that everybody is being lifted above a certain standard of living. But it cannot be to the exclusion of direct payments, because at the end of the day, beyond the policies that will help everybody, there is a direct impact and a direct damage that has been done to non-white populations in this country. And where damage has been done, the offended party has to be made whole. And so we can't talk about broader social reforms to the exclusion of the need to compensate for the generational neglect and abuse of very large portions of our society. So yes, we fight for Medicare for all, which would lift everybody. Yes, we fight for college for all, student debt forgiveness, medical debt forgiveness. Yes, we fight for these things that lift everybody. But at the end of the day, a debt is still owed and remains unpaid.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Let's be honest. I'm going to say it just clearly because you guys were so nice about it. If you give people money, particularly people of color, Black families, things like this, right now, the money's going to go back to white corporations or white people. It makes no fucking sense. So let's just be honest about it. It's got to be a comprehensive thing. Otherwise, great, you just redistributed the wealth back. So we could go on and on about that, but we're running out of time. So Gregory, tell us about your race in District 2, because Kevin Toohey apparently has a sister who may live in this district. So he's asking about, well, give us your website, so your policies, your platforms, and then who are you running against? What does your race look like right now before we get out of here? Wrap it up.
Yeah. So for those who are interested to know and who are a little familiar with the geography of South Carolina, the 2nd District is composed of all of Lexington, Aiken, and Barnwell counties, and a large portion of Richland County and a very small portion of Orangeburg County. So that's the district that I'm running in. The incumbent is Joe Wilson, who many know simply for the fact that he shouted out "You lie" at Obama's first State of the Union address. That's hardly the worst thing he's ever done. But that's I wish it were the worst thing he had ever done. But that's how most people recognize the name Joe Wilson. I'm running against him because he has spent over 20 years in this district directly abusing and otherwise neglecting his constituents, residents of other parts of his state, and citizens of the rest of his country. He serves in a federal role. He is charged with representing the public needs and the public benefit, and he has abdicated that responsibility and directly flouted it for over 20 years. So I'm running to end his reign of abuse. And that's what it is and what we have to call it. When people don't have health care, they are being abused. When people are saddled with debt they can never get out from under for having the audacity to participate in a functional society, that is abuse. And so my fight is with Joe Wilson. There is a potential challenger who has filed on the Democratic side. He has not made any formal public announcements, but my fight is with Joe Wilson. Any primary contest that may arise, I'm fully confident that it will not be coming from the left of me. And so my fight will continue to be exactly what it is today, when I don't have a clear challenger, as it would be if I find myself with one. So that the basic premise of my platform is to sum it up is we as working people have certain inherent rights that are not enumerated in the Constitution that we have to recognize as rights and fulfill as rights. And until we do so, we are not a fully functional society. We are an abusive society that is not structured for the basic survival of its majority.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. And so the last question, and I really think this is important. We talked about this a little bit in our last interview with you, but Phenomenal Mysticism, who is now fully woke, says, I hope Gregory Karr challenges the squad like AOC if he gets into Congress. Any plans to do so?
Yeah, I mean, my as I've said on my website, I'm not going to Washington to make nice with the political establishment or those who have abandoned, neglected, and abused working people. Whether those people happen to be on the Democratic or the Republican or the Independent, somewhere in between those sides. My fight is with anybody who would neglect the very basic needs of working people in this country. I don't care how they affiliate. My quarrel is with anybody who would abuse and neglect working people.
Right, fair enough. And I just want to make mention that because Gregory has another challenger on the primary, and then I saw that a Republican has filed, we will reach out to those campaigns as well and hope to get them on, because we're all for the fairness doctrine here, and I never have a problem bringing on people with different political ideologies than my own. So we'll try to get them on as well. And Gregory, we appreciate you taking questions from our audience. These were some tough questions, so I appreciate you taking the time out this morning to join us and answer the questions from everybody else. And for our viewers, Karr for Congress is pretty easy. KARR for Congress.com. Check it out. If you have family and friends in the South Carolina area, please forward this on to them. And as a progressive candidate, progressive candidates are not taking corporate money, PAC money, correct, Greg?
Correct. And on that point, before we go, I do want to point out there's a major fundraising deadline coming up tomorrow. We need all the support that we can get to power this campaign so that we can truly go toe to toe with Joe Wilson. That takes resources, and our first filing deadline is coming up tomorrow with the end of this month. So there is a donate button on the website. Please give what you can and make sure that we can have a strong showing in this first filing.
So I would say that a good thing to say at this point is everybody get in, the car is running.
I like it. See, Andy's gonna do the sloganing. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gregory, and we'll check in with you as this race progresses. So I appreciate that. If you like what you heard, please consider making a donation to Gregory. And thank you, Aspen, for the $5 super chat. She's doing a high five here, so thank you so much. She enjoyed the interview, and we really appreciate everybody weighing in on this one. This was perfect, where all of you get to sit in and ask these really tough questions. So we will bring you more of these. If you happen to have a candidate, local office, county, state, federal, that you want us to feature and do an interview with, we're happy to do it. This is why we do these things, because we are all about your civic engagement. I know a lot of you have checked out. I need you to not in a lot of these races, because some of the topics that we talked about were federally aligned, but others you control locally. And this is why your participation matters. And part of that is holding them accountable. So I really appreciate everybody in your questions, your comments, your discussion amongst each other. You guys are always phenomenal. So thank you very much. Andy, that is all I got. We will have another, can I say this, Fucking Friday, a true Fucking Friday episode coming up. So
Nice.
Be fun and a little bit off the rails. So any final words of wisdom for us on this Wednesday?
I just wanted to just express to Gregory that I always enjoy when you come on, because I love our conversations. I think that you really got an amazing handle on, the fiscal and monetary policy and economics, and how the federal government finances itself, and these are the progressive voices that we need going into our government, right? The ones that are unabashedly and unapologetically telling it like it is, that are actually going there to make a difference. That's the key. And I think that you're a lot like me, that the world needs an absolute shifting of the Overton window to the left as far as we can push it, along with a good uppercut to Overton, just for good measure. So thank you so much, Gregory, for coming on. As well, thank you everyone for tuning in today. I hope that you enjoyed the show. again, Aspen, thank you so much for the super chats. Very much appreciated. Take care, everyone. I hope you have a good Wednesday. And hopefully we will see you here bright and early on Friday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it in G. Whoa.